Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning. Our topic today is a practical and transformative guide to self-leadership with Dr. Seth Kopald, PhD. And welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and today I'm delighted to have Dr. Seth Kopald joining us, and he is a certified Level 3 Internal Family Systems IFS practitioner, and he holds a PhD in organization management. I started to say organizational management and a master's in education. His expertise centers on creating safe environments that foster authentic self-expression. And since 2012, he has been dedicated to helping individuals and couples achieve more balanced lives through IFS. And he has also worked closely with IFS trainings and collaborated, with Dr. Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS. And I'll be honest with you, until I read this book, I didn't even know what it was. So his diverse background includes roles as a Montessori teacher, a college instructor, and a consultant for Head Start programs. And in 2002, he founded Exploration Services, focusing on empowering individuals to become more centered and confident. And he is also the author of Self-Led, Leaving a Connected Life with Yourself and with Others. And that's a book that offers practical guidance on applying IFS principles to enhance relationships, work, parenting, and spirituality. And I have the pleasure of having that book right here on my desk as we speak. Good morning, Seth, and welcome to the show. Listen, before we get started, can you tell our audience a bit about you and how do you like to show up in the world?
Yeah, hi Denise. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and as you mentioned, most of my life has been focused on education and a lot of work on parenting and helping parents communicate with their children and helping even parents of adult children form better relationships with their children when, there's a lot of people out there right now that things have gone astray. And I'm very much a creative person as well. I've done a lot of artwork, and I used to make jewelry. Now I'm a woodworker, and I find working with IFS is just a wonderful complement to just building creativity. Um, I really find that working with our parts and being with our parts, which we'll probably explain as we move along here, helps us be in our highest potential, whether or not we're doing our hobbies or whether or not we're in relationship with others or whether or not we are at work. It allows our brains to even relax, to open up to our um, intuition and our um, creativity, innovation, etc.
Listen, I have to tell you, I was a jeweler for a long time. I was actually a bench jeweler. So I know what you're talking about. And then it was time, the economy got so bad, especially down here in Southwest Louisiana. There was actually bumper stickers that said, last person out of the state, turn off the lights. It was bad.
Mm.
And, I quit. We closed it down, sold what we could, and I went to school and got a computer science degree. But my point is, and I do have one, I didn't know I was creative. I knew that I could tell colors. I knew that I could, millimeters. If something's off a millimeter, it drives me crazy. I'm a picture straightener. But I never considered myself all that creative until I started building websites and started writing. I didn't know I could do that either. But once that creativity hits you, you're like, huh, I did not know this about myself. It's fascinating.
Mm. Yes. And in IFS, we actually believe creativity is one of the natural qualities of self, just like compassion, curiosity, connectedness, courage, and all these things are kind of often hidden in our system. And when we help our parts relax and trust us, these natural capacities flow through. And somebody might not enjoy or feel aligned to creating art, but creativity could also show up in how you solve problems and how you show up in the world with being open to new ideas and things like that.
So before we go too far down this rabbit hole, can you explain, it's a rabbit hole for me if I get in your way, can you explain what internal family systems IFS is for our listeners who might, like I was, be unfamiliar with the concept?
Yeah, sure. So Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz, founded the model. He was a family therapist, which means you would, instead of working with the individual person, you would work with the whole family system to see like what's, causing, and even in an individual within the family, suffering, or dynamics within the family that aren't healthy. And you kind of work with, each person in relationship to the others. And as he was doing that work, he started to become interested and started noticing that within individuals, they also had this like family of parts within them, which means we have like multiple perspectives inside. And it's pretty common. Lots of theories believe that we have something called multiplicity, which means we have many different thoughts and perspectives at once. Um, I often, excuse me, use the example of, what happens when you want to have dessert at the end of a meal. You might have many conflicting beliefs. Some say, I really want that piece of cake. I really want that piece of cake. And then the other parts are saying, if you eat that, you're going to feel horrible. And then once you do eat the cake, why did I eat the cake? I should have never eaten the cake. So we have these voices and parts inside of us. And as we get to know, and this is like from thousands and thousands of people, it shows up almost identically with everybody, even though everybody's system presents differently. In general, people have two general kinds of parts. Some are protective, which are like, how do I show up in the world? How do I present myself? Even how do I might have anxiety or fears or worries because I'm trying to prevent problems from happening. So that's part of our protective system. And we also have protectors that aren't just preventing problems, that react when there's a problem. So when I feel hurt, when I feel scared, when I feel threatened, we have another category of parts that react and often will try to soothe us. So they might turn on the TV and scroll through Netflix, or go through your phone, or some people might have a drink, or people, even extreme parts that will gamble or use alcohol and drugs in extreme ways and things like that. So we call these parts who are preventing problems managers, and that's just a term we use so we have a common language. In these other ones that come in to soothe us, we call firefighters, like they're putting out the fire, as Dick Schwartz would say. Um, and then our protective systems are trying to keep us from feeling like our most vulnerable feelings, which we call exiles, which these are parts of us that hold what I like to say is the really incorrect beliefs, like I'm not good enough, or I'm too much, or I'm not enough to, I'm not worthy of love, or I'm down into my core, I'm bad. And we pick up these messages through how we're treated, mostly through our childhood and our young adult life and into college. And as people say things that are shaming, as people do things that treat us like we're bad, especially when we're very, very young, young children don't have a cognitive ability to say this person, must have their own stuff, and there must be have gone through their own hardships to be able to talk to another human this way. So young children will take on these beliefs like, oh, my mom and dad are telling me I'm bad. I must be bad. And that's really the definition of shame, is that I am bad. Whereas shaming is, telling somebody else they're bad. And what our protectors are trying to do is keep us from feeling those feelings. So someone might be a perfectionist. Somebody might, have to get all A's. Somebody might have to look a certain way anytime they're in public to prevent anyone from like seeing what these parts think we are as these bad or not enough or too much. And then, so what Richard Schwartz found was that as he would interview people and work with people, that we could actually talk to these various parts of us. And sometimes, people can hear it in voices. Sometimes it's just in feelings, like the feeling informs me of what it's saying. Some people are very somatic in their body and they can feel sensations. Some people, like me, have a very vivid imagination where I could see like movies playing in my mind of parts of us. And basically the assumption is that, and I've heard this with many, as I listen to other trauma therapists and things like that, that when bad things happen to us, it's almost like part of ourselves get fractured in the moment. And we get like there's almost an aspect of us that gets locked in that time and space. And some people call it like a wrinkle in the timeline. And you get trapped in this wrinkle. And say, your father says you're no good and you're a piece of junk and you're worthless, and something snaps in you that breaks you in that moment. And I get stuck, say I'm like 10 years old. When I'm 40 and I'm in the work setting and my boss is about to give me a performance appraisal and they start to tell you things where you could improve, oftentimes that 10-year-old in the past simultaneously gets activated as if I'm still there with my father being told that. And then the feeling in my body in the present moment is that intense. So you'll see people overreacting, like when you're on the outside going, wow, I'm surprised you're reacting so much. It's because oftentimes we're kind of sparking these parts of us that are deep inside. And then if that 10-year-old gets activated,
That makes sense.
mm-hmm.
I
And
catch myself doing it every once in a while, but I don't spark, so to speak. I get very quiet, which is dangerous for anybody around me, I'll tell you.
right.
Because
So
once I sort out what I'm thinking, and if I'm stupid enough to say it to you, it doesn't go well.
yeah, yeah. And so when I say spark, I mean like that part might not be activated in my system, the one that feels like I'm worthless. But when somebody says it, it hits that first. And then what I'm hearing from you, this is hypothetically, like I'm not wanting to tell you about your system, but if I had a client saying that, I'd be really curious, like, ooh, that sounds like a really great protective system. Like there's a part of me that wants to say something and unleash maybe something at this other person, but then there's this knowing that I should be quiet and I should like hold back. So that might even be some self energy, which part of this model is that there is a core self that is undamaged. Like we believe like your core soul, your core spirit is is not born damaged or broken or in sin, that we are actually perfectly aligned with everything in the world and everything above us, and that this this it's not even a part of us, like the me, this is me. I could be here with the part. So say you said to me, Seth, this this interview is going really horribly, and my 10-year-old inside hypothetically gets activated and thinks I'm horrible. That would bring my protective system to want to defend or argue. But if I could, in that moment, kind of almost like lengthen, it sounds like what you're doing by being quiet, like I'm just going to not say the thing and just breathe for a moment. I could actually say to these parts who want to defend, who want to fight, hey, can you step back and just let me be with this person and I'll take care of it. And sometimes we
Smarter than
do,
I thought I was.
yeah,
That's good to know.
yeah. And sometimes we like to say in IFS, it's best to speak for our parts, not from them. So if the angry part actually took over my mouth, that's when we like say these horrible things to people, right? Like you're like, "Ooh, I'd really mess somebody up if I said the thing that this part wanted to say." And sometimes you might even notice, like while you're saying those things in the past, there's even another part going, "Why am I saying this? I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud." And I've even had parts where like, don't say the thing, Seth, don't say it, don't say it. Another part takes over, says it. Why did you say it? You know?
Oh geez, I'm so sorry. Do you ever do this? We all have, and I don't know that I had this as a question for you, but you just had me going off in a bit of a tangent there, but we all have internal voices. I mean, we do. And they're like you say, they're typically kind of mean, vicious, in fact. And I will tell you, I'll tell anybody that listens to this podcast, if anybody in a Walmart parking lot spoke to me the way I sometimes speak to myself, I would need bail money.
Mm,
I'd
mm.
be in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. And we call those like our internal critics.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
And as I've gotten to know these critics, and one thing I do want to say, and I hope I don't forget my point here, that we like Richard Schwartz wrote a book called No Bad Parts, because we really believe that all these parts are trying to help in some way. And you might think, how could it possibly help for me to criticize myself with such a mean voice? And when we get to know these parts and we say, how are you trying to help me? Like, why are you doing this? And I don't want to speak for your experience, but for many of my clients, almost always, that these critical parts come in because someone in our life was critical to us when we were younger. And then these parts almost take on the voice of this other person to preempt the outside person from doing it again. So if I
Notice that,
criticize,
by the way. If I start speaking to myself in a way that I really ought to smack myself for, it's not me. It was
mm-hmm,
somebody else who just either really hurt my feelings, which can happen, and I was young enough and not aware enough to take it to heart, and it's still there.
mm-hmm,
But these days, if I catch myself doing it, it's like a bad loop. And I've just stopped some of them from ever appearing again by shut up, sit down, take a seat, and don't ever talk to me again.
mm-hmm.
And I get very vicious about it. And then
Yeah,
it just goes away because I don't permit it to come back.
right. And I'm happy that that helps you. I would
It's
say,
not easy. It's
yeah,
not. It takes a certain amount of
right,
personal grit and, you know, keep it up until they say, okay, fine, I'm leaving now. Okay, bye.
right,
Yeah. But you
and
can't just do it once and it's gone.
right,
You have to force it out. I do anyway.
right, and I want to just share from an IFS perspective. There's like a yes, I hear what you're saying, and there's another technique that it's almost like getting these. So what I'm hearing is there's one part that criticizes, and there's another part that's like banishing the critic, like get out of here, get away. And what
I'm a
we know
mean
is
girl. So just so you know, I'm a mean girl. I don't, it's just like go away
right.
now.
And I would guess that's a part of you because I know everyone's core. Like this is my personal belief, and through IFS supports it that everyone at their core is a loving, compassionate person, and we've had to take on these mean qualities to protect ourselves. And what I'm hearing is, if you were my client, I'd be curious about this. I don't want to define your parts, but what I'm sensing is there's like one part criticizing that often this could get into like a spiritual side of IFS that will actually take on the energy of the people that criticize us. Like you can even ask a part, can you check, is that dad's energy in your body? And the part will say, oh yeah, I feel it. It's like dad is in me criticizing me, or mom or the teacher or
Gotcha.
whoever did that. And then there's this other part who's like wanting to banish. So I might bring both parts into the room, and Richard Schwartz does this conference table technique where you have one part on one side of the table, one on the other, and you're like talking, interviewing both. And I like to almost, because I have
And
early childhood background, I put them on a seesaw.
right.
I put them on a teeter-totter because I like to sit in the middle of the teeter-totter so one part
Right.
can't dominate. And I just let them take turns. Like, how are you trying to help me? I'm criticizing you so people don't, like, if you say and do those things, the world is going to
Gotcha.
hate you.
I was just going to ask for examples, so keep going.
Yeah, the world will hate you, or they're going to be mean to you again, or people are going to criticize you. And this other part's like, yeah, but the fact that you're doing it makes it horrible in here. Like, and so we both parts are somehow trying to help. And then you say, what if there's a me here who could help? Like I'm the leader. That's what we call it, self-leadership. What if I could take over and help this part who's suffering? The critical part who's criticizing must be suffering to be saying these things. Like there must be something it's really trying to protect me from, which is usually like those other parts. Like there's an exile in there that took the criticism, who might believe that I'm a bad person. And what if I could heal that part? Would you still need to criticize me so much? Or what if I updated you to say I'm not a little kid anymore with dad yelling at me or mom yelling at me? What if I introduce you to me as the adult? Because a lot of times our parts think we're young still. So they're like, they have to take over because they're like, you're still 12. And I'm like, oh, like I had one part that literally thought I was 2 years old when I asked it because
I
it
don't even
totally,
remember my childhood, to be honest. So
yeah.
just that you can remember 2 years old is amazing to me.
Well, I can't either. But when I go inside and find the part of me, it remembers. So like if me and you were working together and I asked your critic, like, can you show me, could it tell you stories or show you things? It would probably show you memories that you don't have access to. But these parts, because they're stuck in time, they remember. And then there might be other parts who block us from remembering because
Right.
if I
Well,
remembered it, it would be horrible. Why would I want to
yeah,
remember it?
exactly. Let me ask, because I deal a lot with my own subconsciousness. I deal a lot. I poke around in there. I turn things over for review before I'm going to sleep. Are we talking about that part of us, the part that's we don't have easy access to it, or is it something entirely different?
When we're doing the reviewing.
Well, when these things are happening and you're trying to review and go, what the heck? Where
Hmm.
did that come from? That sounds like something I would turn over to my subconscious for review before I fall asleep.
Mm, that's interesting.
It always, listen, before I don't sleep a whole lot, I never have. But before I know I'm actually going to fall asleep, it's not fake, I'm going to actually make it this time. I will look up at the ceiling fan. I will say my prayers out loud because somebody's listening. God, spirit, angels, I don't, whoever you believe in, somebody is listening.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just you. And then I will say, listen, subconscious, I've got an issue that I cannot seem to work around. And I'll explain it and say, can you give me an answer? And I'm telling you, this is a God's honest truth at 3:18 in the morning. It doesn't matter if I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. 3:18, I wake up and that answer is crystal clear and I write it down.
Mm.
So I guess that's where I'm going with this. Is it something that's buried so deep inside you that, there's ways that you're talking about to find it, or is
Yeah.
it in our subconscious? Where is it? I guess is my question.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is that there's some kind of wisdom that comes forward. And typically in IFS and my own spiritual beliefs, I believe that the self, like when all these parts can relax, and maybe that's what happens when you're sleeping, that all the critical parts and the parts trying to process what is this and what is that, they all somehow relax enough that, if we tap into ourself, we actually, in IFS, we believe, and I personally believe, that the self is connected to like everything, to God, to the universe. And there's,
That's what I was trying to say, and I was
yeah,
not
there,
being articulate about it.
yep, there's like inherent wisdom in that space. So that's the beauty of being self-led, is that when we're almost, once we form a relationship with the critic and the part that wants the critic to go away and the part that makes me has to be perfect all the time and the part that keeps me quiet, and I can have a relationship with them as the leader and they trust me, I can say to these parts, can you guys give me enough space so I'm here too? I'm not kicking you out. Nobody gets kicked out, even the critic. Like, you're trying to help me as hard as any other part, and I'm going to help you not have to work so hard because, I don't even think you want to be talking this mean, do you? And they'll say, no, I don't. And we'll help these parts. But when we get space from these parts, it's just like in your subconscious that you have access to wisdom while you're awake. So we ask these parts to
Wisdom,
give us
Seth,
space.
it's you, and you just said it. It's the world, it's the universe, it's God, it's spirit. I don't know who it is. I don't even try to put a name on it, but there is wisdom that we can tap into if we just sit down and shut up and ask.
Hmm. And in IFS, we often find people be in the middle of a session and they have these deep spiritual moments. Like
Right.
a client will all of a sudden, like Jesus will show up for them, or God will show up for them, or an angel will show up for them, or like a relative who's passed away will somehow come and give guidance. And it's not like we're trying to make that happen, but sometimes when people get into this space, it's like they actually have this gift, and you get to live in the world. And that's why I wrote the book, because It's, I devoted one chapter to parenting, one chapter, how do I do this at work? How do I do this in my relationships? How do I do this in my own spirituality? That I could live in the world with access to this wisdom and access to the ability not to harm people, and the ability to not make it all about me and to hold my agendas back so that I could be in community with other people. And the cool thing is that when I'm in that spacious place, other people's protective systems can relax and then they could be in that spacious place back with us. But when we're blended by these parts that are defensive, self-serving, it's all about me, it invites their parts to do the same. And now we're in conflict of parts against parts. And if I could take the initiative to get space for my parts and I'm coming from this more almost holy place, you'll notice people around you who tend to be like the grumpiest people on the planet, all of a sudden their system softens because they feel a safety in your presence and they don't have to fight you. They don't have to
Right.
guard
I
themselves.
have noticed that. And I have to tell you, I've got page 23 bookmarked. I've got sticky notes all over your book, but it says appreciating and befriending parts. And that's pretty much what we've been talking about. And I've gone over that chapter multiple times because I was saying, that's what I'm doing? I didn't know.
Hmm.
It's pretty interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
keep going.
No, it's beautiful. I'm so glad you're doing it. Um, so I guess, on a very practical terms, as the listeners are hearing this, and this might seem weird, as we're diving into this, but I would love for anyone listening to do like a little experiment and like when you're feeling grumpy or irritated, notice how people respond. And then try your best sometime when you have those feelings to ask, even if you don't know your parts and you don't have a relationship, just almost like ask for your whole system. Like, can everybody inside just give me a little space so I can breathe, so I can feel my heart, like I can feel the natural love and compassion that's always in my heart that's being hidden by these other feelings. And what if I let that love and compassion, even if I don't even say anything, just flow in my body and around me for a moment and watch what happens to other people? You'll see that they, in kind, start to soften and they treat you probably the way you were hoping they would treat you before you got annoyed with them. Like when they're treating you a certain way, you get upset with them. It's because they're not treating you with kindness and respect. But when we soften first and ask these parts to give us
Yeah.
space, it allows them to do that for us.
And you don't have to announce it. And I'll tell you, yesterday I woke up all happy. I did. And I mean, I had all kinds of thoughts racing through my head. I grabbed my journal, I was scribbling it down, and then all of a sudden, and I have no idea what happened, I just snapped. And I live alone blissfully, but I am not quite a crazy cat lady, but I fully intend to grow up to be one. And
Mhm.
watch your pets. They know what you're doing. They know if you're grieving, they know if you're ticked. And I'm telling you, they got out of my way. And I had to do exactly what you're saying. Stop, reflect, clean up the mess that you just made. Because I mean, I was hollering at them, poor things. They hadn't done a darn thing wrong, but one cat stepped in front of me. I was like, dang it, stop it. I mean, I got really irritated with her, and she does it all the time, but this time was just, it just got to me. And I had to sit down. I went outside. I can't take them outside. My cats are indoors. But I went outside with my dog and I just was breathing. Then I came back in and I just stood in my living room and I said, I'm sorry. And they all came back.
Mm,
But watch your pets because they know exactly what you're up to.
I agree, 100%.
And if you want to know if a hurricane's coming, watch them. They'll tell you.
Yeah,
You know, don't even watch a weather channel, just watch your pets.
I believe that. Yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, I would, if people are listening, like I would just, I mean, I'm sure people are listening, but th I would say like what you just said is such a wonderful thing. There's like this pause. Like I'm noticing I'm acting in a way that's maybe causing harm to my pets or causing harm to other people around me or irritating people. I'm just going to take a moment, and using your breath is a beautiful way to start. And once we start breathing, we could just stop there because we tend to get calm. but I'd like to encourage people to take the next step and go, who was that? Like, like where did I feel that in my body that I was so upset? Like, oh yeah, there was like a tightness in my chest. Okay. And I might ask the
Mm,
tightness in my chest, like, what do you want me to know? Like, why are you so angry? Like, what's happening? And if you could not try to like figure it out and tell the story of this part, let it tell you its story as if you don't know, you always get this beautiful information that helps you. Like, it'll tell you, like, I was getting overwhelmed and I was feeling this and feeling that, and my system
hmm
was frying, and I was yelling at the cat, so I didn't fully demolish myself, or I didn't explode. And you're like, oh, okay, so I see how you're trying to help me. And tell me more, like how long have you been doing this for me, like protecting me from being overloaded?
And
And
you
then it
just
might be,
explained what happened yesterday. I mean, these poor cats, they looked at me and they froze and then they just quietly disappeared. And normally if I'm in a room, they're in here with me.
Mhm.
I've got two 20-pound gingers, 20 pounds. Right now they're on the desk, 40 pounds of cats on the desk. I don't budge without them, but for about an hour or so, I was alone in here.
Mm.
They weren't having it, and I didn't blame them. But I
Right,
was overwhelmed, and I didn't even catch it. I just knew that my irritation was off the charts.
right. So if you ask that irritated part, it might even tell you more about the overwhelm. It might even, if I was working with a client, I might even say, would you like to take me, would it like, if I was working with you, for instance, I'd say, after we get to know the part who got irritated, would you like to take us to the part who was actually overwhelmed? And it might be a little girl, like a 5-year old or a 10-year old or a 2-year old, or sometimes they're infants that are like, because like when there's no words for why I'm so overwhelmed, like my whole body is like shaking, or I'm just like overcome with this overwhelmed feeling, and there's nothing to describe it. A lot of times it's like an infant inside of us, because when babies are sensorial beings. They don't think about what they're feeling. They just feel. Like if a baby is wanting something, they're not thinking I'm hungry. They're just, the hunger makes them upset. So oftentimes we'll find an infant inside, and it'll show actually a vision of like, oftentimes when this happens, it's like the infant shows itself alone, like crying in a crib, nobody coming, and really uncomfortable, like maybe had gas pains or was hungry, or I mean, not to say their parents were even abusive or neglectful, but in that moment, maybe people did the Ferber method or something like that, where they let the kids cry it out. You know, the these infants will show us stories about what it is. And I know for me personally, I have an infant part that when I have a full body anxiety, when I'm like shaky, like something in my external life is going not pretty wrong or something, and I can, it's like I can't stop this feeling from being shaky. If I can remember, oh yeah, that infant, I kind of always imagine I keep it like across my chest in like in those cloth slings, like I used to hold my kids with. And I will just kind of almost put my hands over my chest like I'm holding a baby, and I'll just kind of rock it and pat it. And I'll notice when its nervous system starts to relax, my whole body relaxes. And it's almost like, oh, that's you. Like something somebody just said activated you, or made you feel alone, or made you feel abandoned, or whatever it is. And if I take care of this little one, I notice my whole nervous system comes back online. And and I think earlier I was saying talk for your parts. I could say, wow, when that just happened, this infant in me got really activated, and I got really anxious. And I have another part that wanted me to just leave.
All right. And you just said something that I had completely forgotten about yesterday, and I was shaky. I was jittery. That almost never happens to me. And I remember thinking, why am I like this? I didn't drink coffee. I had tea, but there was not enough caffeine in there. I mean, I was actually feeling a little bit sick. It
Mhm.
passed, but it was very odd for me. And I completely
Yeah.
forgot about it until you said that.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the key is with IFS is I don't want to tell you for sure that was an infant part because our job is
Was
to
there's no
be,
telling.
yeah, our job is to be curious, to ask your system to tell us the story. So that's why IFS is very different. So people can use it in therapy and coaching and education. So when therapists are using it, it's a paradigm shift where in the past therapists would say, what you're suffering here is blank based on what you're telling me. And, you know, whereas in IFS, we're like, hey, we're not sure what this is. Let's go inside and ask. And if you were sitting with an IFS practitioner or therapist, they might help you go to that feeling and it might share with you, oh, this wasn't an infant, or this was something else, or, you know, some people believe there's the energy, like there's like, it depends on what you believe in, spirituality, and there's like things happening with the planets and solar flares, and it might even affect our nervous system. Like we don't know exactly what's happening. Um, but oftentimes more than less, a part will show up and they'll tell a story. Believe it or not, I've actually even had parts in the womb show me things. Um, like my parents adopted 3 kids before they got pregnant with me.
Right.
And my mother actually told me in the past, like, I wanted to have a baby so I could feel loved. Like, because she said she never felt loved in her life. And my mom actually just passed in January. She was 90, close to 94, 95.
Yeah.
Um, and she struggled her whole life with relationships. And she thought having a baby means I'm guaranteed to be loved, which sounds beautiful, but in reality, what that meant is for me as the one growing inside of her, the feeling that overcame me was not that she's here to hold me, I'm here for her. And when I went inside and this part in utero showed me things and gave me, it's more of like a feeling. It just kind of came over me like an awareness, like, aha. Like it was almost like my energy was being sucked away from me so she could be cared for. And that really fit my whole life growing up. Like I was almost like her therapist when I was a little kid. Like I was always taking care of her problems. Um, and it really set up my whole system of being like I have these great caretaking parts that I've, even as a practitioner, I've had to learn not to let them take over. And not to, that I had to work with parts of me that felt like, I didn't get, what like a true mothering experience. Like I didn't get, I almost want to say, even though I had a mother, I never really felt like, what does it mean to have a mom? Like a mom is there for you, right? A mom is there for you, the kids, the mom takes care of you and like is present with you and loving towards you. So when we don't get those things, like imagine an infant not feeling that kind of inherent, like this is the order of nature. Like the mom or dad is supposed to like help you feel loved and held and secure. When you don't have that, your nervous system would get really shaky and you might feel like unsafe. You might actually feel like like actually the part that thought I was 2 years old told me if my kids stopped loving me, I would die. And I'm like, huh? What does that mean? Like, and the more I got to know this part, I was like, well, how old do you think I am? It said, I think you're 2.
How old do you
Like
think I am? And you did say 2. And I went, okay. And I
the
wanted to
parts
ask you
that
about that.
Yeah, the part that I was talking to said I was 2. And I was like, really? You see me as a 2-year-old, which totally makes sense because a 2-year-old who isn't loved, like a 2-year-old horse can live alone. A 2-year-old giraffe could live alone. A 2-year-old human will die if they're not loved. Who is going to take care of me? Right? So I had to tell this part, no, I'm in my 40s at the time. Like, look at me. Look at you must be looking at another part of me, but I'm actually this age and I've devoted myself to parenting. I don't think my kids are going to stop loving me. And this part was like, oh, that means you could take care of me too. Like it thought it had to take care of me because I was 2 years old. And my whole life shifted. Like prior to that, I was like so careful with everything I did because I was going through a divorce and I was like so afraid my kids would stop loving me and I couldn't understand why. Like, why am I so terrified? And then it finally came to me that this part of me who was so terrified literally thought, like, you lose love, you die. because that was my reality when I was little. Like I had to find a way to be cared for because the love was shaky. It wasn't guaranteed.
Me off a bit of a tangent, but I guess this is why we hear about narcissism, I'm guessing. But aside from that, is this why we hear these terrible stories about kids coming from war-torn orphanages and coming over here and they can't cope. They're barely human.
Yeah. You need like how your nervous system operates, like whether or not I can function or be overwhelmed or like have anxiety or everything else. Like when you're little, the love and holding that parents give you help your nervous system grow in a proper way. So it's almost like a tree that's given all the proper nutrients and all the sunlight and all the water and everything it needs in the soil. It's going to grow in its natural way. But when you see these trees that are like growing out of a crack in the sidewalk or like behind a brick wall, it gets deformed and it strives to succeed, but it's really can't, so this we do get set up um to fail in these kind of environments. And even with those people who come from those places, and even like I know Richard Schwartz has even worked with people who've done horrible things, murderers and things like that. When he helps them get to know their parts, it's still always the same. There's always a self underneath all that horribleness who's a loving, compassionate person. And when you even ask the parts, why did you do these horrible things? In some what some people might say some twisted way, but in some way, these parts thought I was helping not the world, helping me survive.
Glad you made that distinction. What, and it sounds to me like I like people, I really do, but I am a highly committed introvert, and I can only be around people that I don't really not know, like, or trust or find fascinating for 59 and 3/4 minutes. That's it. I'm gone. I have to go. I've
Hmm.
timed it. But I often think, especially now, if I'm silly enough to turn on, I don't watch the news, but I'll, listen to what's going on. And I think maybe it's time for God to just dump out the anthill and start over. It's
Yeah.
like we are so damaged.
Mm.
It,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. But I look at and listen to some of these people, and I'm telling you, I will never need a facelift. My eyebrows hit my hairline. I look permanently surprised, like I had a bad facelift. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with you? And that's about as far as I go because some of these people, many of them, particularly in politics right now, are so god awful that I don't want to hear a single word they have to say. Now I'm willing to believe you. There's probably some good in there, but I don't have the time or the energy to go look for it.
Yeah. I get that. That makes
It's
total sense.
horrible. It's horrible. It really
Well,
is.
you know, that's the hard part of our job here. It's like, how do I hold self energy even in those moments? It's not easy because our parts don't want us to. Our parts don't want me to be compassionate to people that they see as evil or
E-
mean or hateful.
Explain that because it seems like we should try. But like I said, I'm a mean girl, and if you come across as being vicious or stupid, you do not have my attention any longer, and you'll never get it again.
Well, we could even, I'd be curious if you ask that, almost ask inside, like the part, you might even feel that, like, I'm going to push people away who act that way. Even the feeling of
That
pushing
door
people away.
slams, and they don't have access to me again. If I see
Right.
them on, Newsmax is about the only thing I'll watch because I can almost tolerate that and watch or listen to. And the minute I hear these screeching harpies, male or female, I'm out. I'm gone. Mute it, leave the room.
Yeah.
It's
And
like if you
again,
cannot compose yourself and make sense, you don't get my attention. So yeah, I push them
mhm.
out.
So that would be a protector in IFS.
Okay, I wondered. Yeah.
And you could ask the protector, I don't know if you want to try it now. It might be hard because might have never met this one, but even if you ask that feeling of pushing people away, like, how are you trying to help me? And just kind of see what wisdom comes back.
Try that because there are a few people in my life, been in and out of, well, in my life a long time ago. They're no longer. And when I do think about them, I'm going to be telling on myself here, but when I do rarely think about that, the first thing I think is no, no.
And what would happen if you said yes? Like, I'm not saying you to say
I
yes.
have no clue. I've never
What's
even
the
given it any
feeling?
thought.
What's the feeling in the body? Like, hypothetically, we're not trying to make you be with those people, but hypothetically, if this part said, I'm out of here, I'm going on vacation, and I'm not going to say no anymore, what would happen? Like, what's the feeling inside that you feel? Like, would it be threat? Would it be like I'd be devastated, I'd be overpowered, or their hatred would get into my body? Like, what's the feeling?
The wall. I mean, it's a definite wall. I'm
Okay.
not going to get around it. They're not going to get around. When I say I'm done and when I say no, I'll say no twice because the second time is a courtesy. There is no third time.
Uh-huh.
Not only am I mean, I'm pig-headed. But when something has happened in my life that I'm just okay, go
Mm-hmm.
forth, go with God, but you're
Mm-hmm.
never getting to me again. I mean it.
Right.
So I
And
haven't
so,
thought about it. I don't even know what that
right.
would look like or feel
So
like.
you could even right now, without even doing anything else, just say hi to the wall because the wall's often apart. Just say, "Hey, wall, thank you for helping me. Like you're working
The
really
wall,
hard."
I'm fine with it. So
Yeah,
I don't see any reason to do anything different.
yeah,
But that no is, I mean, talked
right.
about, I think in pictures. I'll be in a kitchen, in my kitchen making a gumbo, and I'm building a website, standing over that pot, cooking my roux, because it takes a long time. And I've built a website in pictures in my head by the time I make it back to my desk and write it all down.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about you do something similar, but I see that wall. It's
Mm-hmm.
big, it's strong, and it's not coming
Right.
down.
And if you wanted to, not to ask the wall to leave, if you wanted to at some point, you could literally ask the wall, tell me the story of how you became. Like, how did you end up in my life and how do you help me? And the wall will actually give you information. It'll say, I started when you were like this age because this person was going to hurt you, or I started around this time. And if I did go away, what would happen would be that these other parts of you would get really hurt. So I'm not leaving. So we can actually interview in a loving way these walls. And again, not because we're trying to get rid of anybody. You can even I love my walls. Like my walls are my protection. I have walls too. Like I feel like I have these inner circles. Like the people I trust get to be on the inner walls, and then the people I kind of trust are a little bit outside of that realm, and then the people I don't trust at all, they're locked out and because it's protecting my system, my parts
Yeah.
show me like for me to stay a loving, kind person, there's certain people's energies I need to stay out. And I'm like, thank you so much for helping
The
me.
same. Yeah, and I never even thought about asking my wall. I'm going to do that this weekend. I'll be out in the yard picking up tree branches. We've had all kinds of, I'm in the deep south, so
Hmm.
when any kind of weather event comes through, which happens
Yeah.
periodically, I'm out there going, dang it, and I'm picking up and cutting and tearing
Yeah.
stuff down. But I'm going to ask my wall, not that I'm prepared to let the wall go in these
No, no,
particular
no.
cases, but I would like to know where it came from.
Yeah. And again, I really want to say we're not in the business of getting rid of any parts or even telling them to stop. We just want to be in relationship with them.
That
So
makes sense.
because otherwise sometimes these parts take us over when we don't, when it's not necessarily needed. Like I have a part like a wall, and I have I have a part I call the cloak, which it's almost like this magical cloak that covers me up and I go completely flatline numb. So if somebody says something really hurtful, it's like I might feel a twinge for a second, but then it's like boop, like I don't feel nothing, you can't hurt me. The problem is sometimes that cloak would cover me up during good times, and I would see people laughing and dancing and having a time, and I'm sitting there quiet, like, why can't I feel the joy that they're feeling? And I realized my cloak was overworking. Like it would protect me from everything, even joy. So I got in relationship with the cloak, and now we kind of work together. Like I might say, hey, cloak, I think it's okay if I experience this. But there's other times where I'm like, thank you for staying because I don't want to experience that. So now we have choice. We have choice when the wall is here. And it's almost like we collaborate, like me and the wall now work together. So instead of the wall saying, you don't have a choice, I'm just blocking it, the wall might say, hey, I'm here. And you might say, yeah, you're right. Stay up. I agree with you 100%. And then there might be other times you say, hey, well, I wonder, I feel like I'm okay. Like, what if you come down or just move aside a little bit and see how I do? And if it doesn't work, come back.
And when we're talking about the wall, I'm thinking about President Reagan telling Gorbachev, take down this wall.
Take down the wall.
Yeah, and I don't want my wall taken down. But, it's fascinating. What we're talking about is that there are so many parts of us, and there's that word again, so many parts that we either are not aware of or we're just not curious enough to go figure out what's going on. Humans are incredibly difficult people, I find. And I'm not saying you are or my best friend Maggie is. I'm saying I'm difficult and I know it because there are so many moving parts and some that I can't see.
Right.
There's feelings that or instincts that pop up. I'm like, where in the heck did that come from? So I'm constantly curious. And if I'm hearing you correctly, that's what IFS is. Be curious.
Mm-hmm. And if people, if oh, you have my book, so you're welcome, you can do it. But if somebody else wanted to, in my book, I have exercises where it gives you lists of questions. So you kind of know, like, well, what would I ask my parts to get to know them? And so in different chapters, in a few different places, it'll give you like, these are the questions. And when you ask your parts questions, try to remember to do it from your heart, not so much your head, because when our head is asking questions, it's usually like interrogating, like tell me this and tell me that, and what about this, and why do you do that? And there might even be like some critical feelings. But our heart, when we do it from like a heart energy, it's more like, think of like the most loving parent, the most loving spiritual leader, the most loving angel, right, that lives inside of us, that would just say, oh, wow, you work so hard. Like, tell me your story. Like, tell me more about what you do, why you do it. I want to befriend you. I want you to feel supported by me. You've been helping me for all these years. Like, what if I could support you too? Like, how hard is it to be the wall? How old was I when you started? Like, oh my gosh, like you've been working so hard.
Yeah, that
And I'm,
poor wall. It's,
yeah. See,
I
like right
almost feel
there.
sorry for it a little bit, but not enough to say, oh, it's okay, you can go down because that ain't happening, none, as we
Well,
say in the
again,
deep south.
like the love and compassion doesn't tell the wall it has to leave, because otherwise we don't have an agenda to get rid of the wall. The agenda is that the wall knows you're here too, that you could support the wall and you could give it some love and attention and help it decide, is now a time when we really need you to stand guard, or can you rest? Like, what if the wall could rest when it's actually safe?
Good question. Listen, we are actually running out of time. This has been fascinating, but I've got one last question, Seth. For our listeners who want to start their journey towards being more self-led, what is one simple practice they can begin with today?
I think the most simple practice is when you feel activated, like when I'm like, oh, I'm upset, or I'm like really irritated or agitated or feeling defensive, is to pause before you say anything to anybody. And like you said, take some breaths and just maybe ask, like almost as if you have an announcement system in your body, like a intercom, like, hey, everybody, like what is happening? Who is there anything that anyone inside wants to tell me? Why am I so agitated? And don't just think I need to figure out why. Ask and then be passive listening. Like I'm just gonna listen and see what messages, just kind of almost like if I'm staring at a still lake, like these little, imagine these little buoys floating from the bottom of the lake that bob to the top, and all of a sudden there's a break in the surface. Oh, there's a little piece of information. And if I just stare at the lake, oh, there's another piece of information. Oh, there's more. And if you just listen, your system will tell you and your parts will tell you, like, I'm irritated because this person is making me feel this way. And I want to get irritated with them because if I do, it'll shut them up and then they won't be hurting me anymore. Oh, that's how you're helping me. Thank you. Like, can you tell me more? And eventually these parts, through, if you do that simple practice enough, they start to know, like, there's a trusted leader here. There's somebody who shows up and listens and appreciates my work. Maybe I could trust you, leader, to take over more instead of me having to take over as a part.
And when I talk about going outside and breathing, I have a love tuner. I don't know if you know what that is. I had a guest who created the love tuner, and it's basically a little whistle, but it's for, it's for turning yourself down, turning that ratchet it down,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for breathing. And I will go out with that love tuner, and I hope my neighbors can't hear me because it's loud. And I calm down almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very helpful.
That's great. And then, because I'll say this real quickly, is having these kind of techniques and resources are really amazing. And I have a ton of them myself, and I would love to try that whistle. I would just like to say, and once you get to that calm space, if we don't get to know our parts, it's just a matter of time before they blend with us again and we have to use the whistle again. And then they take over again and we have to use the whistle. So, what if we use the whistle to get into this peaceful place where we can then start asking our parts questions? So, once you get into that calm space, that's the best time to ask because when we're irritated, trying to ask our parts don't want to talk to the irritated part of us. They want to talk to the loving part of us.
Not at all.
Right? So the love whistle will get me into a space of love, and then I'm like, "Oh, who is irritated in my body? Can you tell me more?" And I want everyone to know, I'm guessing that I can speak for all of us. When we feel seen, heard, and like really seen, like I get you, like I understand what you're saying, you feel your body can settle down when people see us and hear us and feel like, and I appreciate you. Like I hear you and I get it and I appreciate what you're saying. Something in us relaxes. When we can say that to our parts who get really activated, like I see you, I hear you, I get what you're doing for me, they don't have to be so extreme. We don't have to get as annoyed with people.
And that does make sense. Listen, I hate to do this, but we're out of time. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I'll send you the link to the Love Tuner.
Right.
It's made a lot of difference in how I can calm my agitation down and calm myself down. It's not really a whistle. You breathe into it and it sounds a note
Oh,
that is
okay.
supposed to center your body. It's magic. It really is.
Yeah.
But listen, tell everybody, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us today. So, how, before you go, do you have any final thoughts and where can people connect with you?
Well, the easiest way is simply going to my website, which is my first name, last name. So it's Seth Kopald, SethKopald.com. And the homepage tells you what I do, and it has a link to my book. And you can, if you want to buy it from me personally and have me write in it, I always write a little phrase and sign it. You can order it from my website, or you can just order it from Amazon or other bookstores, links that are there. Um, I guess the final message is I want everyone to know, no matter what people tell you, there's an unbroken, beautiful, like God, like almost godlike energy light inside of you, which is you, yourself. And any negative belief you have about yourself, I can guarantee is not true. It's a belief that your parts have taken on by how you were treated in this world. And if you can tap into that natural goodness, natural lovingness soul that you have, you can not only be there for yourself, but you can be there for the people that you love. And just trust that you are at your core unbroken and pure and healed.
Thank you, Seth. And listen to our audience. Today we had the privilege of exploring the transformative concept of being self led with Dr. Seth Kopald, and he shared insights into internal family systems, IFS, and how it can help us navigate life with greater authenticity and connection. And from understanding our inner parts, and pay attention to that word, inner part, well, phrase, I guess, inner parts, to applying self led principles in relationships, work, and parenting and cat parenting, apparently. He provided practical advice and inspiring stories in his book, Self Led: Living a Connected Life with Yourself and with Others, offers a comprehensive guide into to achieving a more centered and fulfilling life. And it does require curiosity. So be ready to be curious. So if you're inspired to embark on your own journey, be sure to check his book out. And you, like he said, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on his website. And for more resources and to stay updated on future episodes here, visit our website at yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review to help others discover these really valuable, I think, conversations. And until next time, thank you for listening. Seth, thank you again. Thank you for the book, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Denise. It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.